All right. Well, thank you for being with us, everyone. Today is the last Sunday in January, and today we finish up our Back to Basics series, where every January we kind of go back to do a reset, to kind of ask ourselves, what is it that I believe? How do I know what I know? What other possibilities are there? How much have I grown in this last year? And how much do I want to grow in the next year? Sort of like New Year's resolutions, you know. When we come together a year from now and we do this again, where do we want to be? Where does each and every one of us want to be in terms of our spiritual progression, our spiritual spiraling upward? So Dr. Holmes starts this last chapter to the introduction to the textbook with what we would call in sales a call to action. You know, if you're doing a sales presentation, you want somebody to take action. You want them to buy your product, typically. So there's always a call to action in there. There's always a, get up, call in now kind of appeal that says, do something with this. Don't just be entertained by it. Don't just watch the commercials because they're funny, but do something. See? And Dr. Holmes starts right out, the very beginning of the chapter, and he says, the great danger in the new order of thought, which is what he's talking about, new thought, science of mind. The great danger is there'll be too much theory and not enough application. Words to that effect. Not enough practice. See, it's not enough just to know about something. You really don't know it until you do it, until you can do it. And he goes on to tell us that. So think of virtually anything that you have ever learned in your life. And you can get a lot of theory. You can learn a lot. You can read a lot. Nowadays you can watch a lot of videos on the internet that tell you how to do things. So you can know a great deal about something, but you really don't know it until you do it. So I've used the example before of most of us drive a car. And if you took driver's ed, you know, they put you in a classroom and they start to tell you the theory of how a car works. And lots of things that none of us would ever use, you know. How an internal combustion engine converts gasoline to horsepower, to torque, to move the car. Who cares? Who cares? You know? I don't need to know that. Make a car go. But you learn all of these things. They teach you all of these things about what happens when you put your foot on the brake pedal and how the fluid pressure increases in the master cylinder and yada yada and all these things. And none of that really helps you to drive the car. So you learn all of these things about cars. You learn all of these things about driving. You learn all of these things about traffic laws and signals and defensive driving. And you learn all of these things, some of which actually apply to when you start to drive the car. But until you get behind the wheel and you start driving, you don't know. You don't know. And for many of us, that first experience when we get behind the wheel and we start driving, excuse me, is one of shock and awe. Because the car is not doing, in our experience, what we thought it would do when we read about it or we heard the lecture, you know. So the instructor simply says, you know, you take your foot off the brake, you put it on the gas, you slowly let the clutch out, and the car starts to go forward. You know. And of course you do that and the engine stalls, or the car bucks, or it lurches out from under you at a rate of speed you didn't expect, you know. So what do? You slam your foot back on the brake and then the car grinds to a halt. If it's a stick shift, you stall the engine, you know. So you have to go through You have to go through this learning experience. You have to go through this actual practice before you know how to drive a car. When I was teaching our kids when they were teenagers and I was teaching them to drive, I got an old VW Bug, a stick shift, and took them out someplace. And I said, now this is the first lesson. I said, the first lesson is I'm going to teach you how to stall the engine. You're going to let the clutch out too fast and you're going to stall the engine, and the car's going to buck and the engine's going to stall. And they said, well, that's crazy. Why do you want to teach us how to stall the engine? And I said, well, you're going to do it anyway, so you might as well start there and realize that it's not the end of the world when the engine stalls. You just restart it and go again. And the other thing about it is I can't tell you where the friction point on this car is in reference to your leg muscles. It's something that you have to learn through experience. I can tell you let the clutch out until the engine just starts to engage, but you're not going to know what that is until you actually do it, and until you actually miss that point and you stall the engine. So what I was doing was I was helping them to get started in the wheel of learning by doing. I got them right involved, I got them doing, and once they got comfortable with the fact that, yeah, they understood where the friction point was, they understood what it was like to stall the engine, they understood how to restart it, then a great deal of fear was gone from them learning how to drive. And the point is, it is not until you do something that you really learn it. And Dr. Holmes goes on to say, and in fact, we only know as much as we can do. We only know that which we can do. Now, I think this is very interesting because he wrote the original version of this textbook in 1926. The one that we use now in all of our classes was written in 1936, and all of the classes are standardized on that. So if you're taking a lesson with someone and they say, go to page 272, paragraph 3, it doesn't matter what edition of the 1936 book you have, they're all paginated the same way. Even the large print editions are all paginated the same way. So he wrote this book first in 1926. I think his first book was published in 1919. But he's beginning by telling us it's not just enough to know about. We have to learn by doing. We have to apply that which we know. And the very last public talk that he gave, Dr. Holmes, was at the Asilomar Conference Center in Pacific Grove, California. I think it was 1954, somewhere around there. And it's called A Sermon by the Sea, and you can actually buy it in a little booklet, or you can, it's probably online now. But this was the last formal talk that he gave before he retired. And in that talk, he's also issuing a call to action. He's asking people what they think would happen if we had 1,000 like-minded people all working for the same purpose, for the same goal. So he was very adamant in his teaching that it's nice to learn, it's nice to read, it's nice to study, it's nice to talk about what we're learning, but if that's all we do, it's not enough. We have to apply. We have to apply what we're doing. So there's two points that I want to make to that. And the first is, well, what is the purpose of all of this? Why do we even study? Why do we even talk about these things? What is it that we are hoping to accomplish with all of this? Where are we going? And in our Wednesday night group, we're reading a book called The Leap by Steve Taylor. Steve Taylor is a psychologist, and he's kind of looking at this experience that you might call a mystical experience, you might call it the experience of cosmic consciousness. Benson, I think Benson might have called it the peak experience. But there's this experience that people have. There's this experience of other consciousness that people have, and people have had these throughout the ages. And many times it's considered to be a spiritual experience or a religious experience. And that becomes the foundation of a new religion. So what happens is somebody has this experience, and they come back and they tell other people about their experience, and other people say, "Oh, that's really cool. I would like to have that experience. How did you do that?" And they try to describe what their practice was, what they were doing. Maybe they were fasting, Maybe they were going through sleep deprivation. Maybe they were in an intense period of prayer for many days. All of these different things that people were doing, and they say, "This is how I did it." And they say, "Oh, okay, well, we need to do that as well." And dogma and creed starts to grow up around this person's experience. The religion is born, and the religion is about a teaching, the dogma, the creed. And it's about sustaining that teaching and about sustaining the purity of that teaching in terms of the adherence, right? This is our teaching, and it's going to remain pure. You may remember in some of the older religions before the printing press, the scriptures were on scrolls, and they had to be copied by hand. And as they got old, a scribe would take an old scroll and letter by letter would copy the new scroll and cross-check. And when they were satisfied that they had exactly copied down everything that was on that old scroll, then they rolled that old scroll up and burned it in the fire. There was no possibility that it would be out there, and it could be altered, or the dirt, the smudges on it and things like that might cause somebody to misinterpret it and therefore have a different meaning. They were about preserving the purity of their teaching. So what happens is someone has this experience, and a religion is born from that. But then what happens is, over time, is perhaps the religion loses sight of the end goal, which is for others to have that experience. And the religion consumes itself in keeping the religion the way it is, keeping the buildings up, keeping the money coming in, keeping the training programs going, all of those other things. And it gets all wrapped up into the details of the organization, and it tends to lose sight of the goal, which is to encourage others to have that spiritual experience. So what we wish, what we're talking about here is why should we read, why should we study, and then why should we apply that which we are reading and studying and learning? And the answer is because this is what leads us. This is one way that leads us to a deeper experience of God. The spiritual experience that we're talking about is a deeper experience of God. Dr. Holmes called it the conscious, the realization of the conscious realization of the presence and the activity of God, or unity with the presence and the activity of God. In other words, we are consciously aware that we are experiencing the presence and the activity of God. That's the way that he put it. And that's really what we wish. That's really, if you want to think of an end result or an end goal, that is really what we wish. And everything that we read and everything that we study and everything that we apply leads us to that, and that should be the purpose of it. So in the doing we are growing. In the doing we are growing. Let me use the example of physical exercise. You can get 8 zillion different tapes that you can watch on all kinds of exercise. You can just go on YouTube and you can pull up anything, and there's an exercise program for everything. You know, there's people who are teaching yoga. There are people who are teaching kickboxing. There's people teaching weightlifting. There's people teaching calisthenics. There's all kinds of different videos there that will tell you how to do exercise. But if you never do the exercise, if you just sit and watch the videos, you're not going to grow. Your body is not going to grow. You're not going to become more flexible. You're not going to become stronger. You're not going to become leaner or healthier. You're just going to know a lot about exercise. So you have to actually apply that which you are learning if you are to get the benefit from what you are learning. And in our spiritual practice, whether it be the spiritual practice of meditation or the spiritual practice of treatment, which is what we're talking about here, we have to apply. We have to apply that which we know. Excuse me. That is if we are ever to get to the ultimate desired end state, which is a deeper realization of the experience and the presence and the activity of God right where we are, right here and right now. Now, if we could have that leap, if we could be in that conscious awareness, if we could be in that experience of the presence of the divine at all times, we wouldn't need a process. We would be there. We would be there. In Buddhism, they use the example of the raft representing the teaching, and the idea is you come to a shore and you want to get across this body of water, and in order to get across the body of water, you need a vehicle to get from here to there. So you construct a raft, and you make your paddles, and you get on that raft, and you paddle across the other side. And once you get to the other side, you don't need the raft anymore. The raft has served its purpose. So it would be silly to pick that raft up and strap it to your back and carry it wherever you go and tell everybody, hey, look at this beautiful raft I made. You know, look at the way I lashed the logs together. Look at the paddles and the way I made the paddles. And let me tell you about my voyage and how I got across this body of water. It doesn't matter. The point was to get across, and we got across. And what tends to happen sometimes is if we lose sight of the purpose, if we lose sight of what we're trying to do, which is to get across that barrier, the barrier that seems to separate us from the presence of the divine. Once we get across that, we're there. Once we get across that, we don't need our raft any longer. So organizations that get stuck over and over and over again and becoming about the organization and becoming about the particular teaching can sometimes lose sight of that fact, right? That if they're doing their job, then the teaching will eventually go away. There'll be no need for it. Everybody be on the other side, hopefully. So keep that in mind. Why are we together? Why are we participating in this activity? And the reason that we're doing it is, I'm suggesting, maybe I'm hoping, I'm suggesting, it is because we truly desire a deeper connection, an experience of a deeper connection to the presence of the divine. Now the second thing about, and we're going to come back and talk about how the doing enhances that growth in a minute. But the second thing about the doing is what we call the wheel of learning. There's usually 4 stages in the models that we would use in developing training interventions and things like that. There's usually 4 stages, and it's called reflecting, connecting, deciding, and doing. And it goes in a circle, so after doing, you go right back into reflecting. Now you can start at any of these 4 entry points into the wheel, and different people prefer to start in different places. But until you've gone all the way around the wheel, no matter where you start, until you've gone all the way around the wheel. You haven't completed the wheel of learning. So typically, we think of it as we start with reflecting. We get some new information, we're taught some new things, we start to think about things, and what do they mean? And then we try to connect those things, those new things, to things that we already know. Oh, this is like that. And so you remember the parable of the 4 blindfolded men who find the elephant, and they're trying to take this elephant, which is bigger than any of them can see, and they each have a little part of it, and they're trying to describe the elephant in terms of something they already know. The elephant is like a wall, the elephant is like a rope, the elephant is like a snake, the elephant is like a tree trunk. Okay? They're trying to connect. They're trying to take that which they have just discovered, that they're reflecting upon, that they're analyzing, that they're processing, that they're trying to make sense of this thing. And the way that we try to do it is we try to fit that into, to liken it to something else. In terms of the scripture, this is what's called putting new wine into old skins. And some things that you learn are going to be so radically different that they're not going to connect to anything you know. You can't put that kind of new wine into old skins. The old skins will burst. The old paradigm has to go. The old paradigm is just so completely out of place, we have to let it go. But we get new information, we think about new information, we try to fit it into our old paradigms, our old ways of thinking. Sometimes it doesn't fit, and then we've got to change our paradigms. And then eventually we have to say, okay, well, so what? So what? So now I've got this information. Now I have some type of an understanding of it. I see how it fits into other things that I've been told. Now what am I going to do with this? What am I going to do with this? It's deciding. What am I going to do with it? And eventually we figure out, well, if this were true, well, what could I do with it? Whatever we decide, we go ahead and we do it. And then just like driving the car, we do it and we find out, well, that didn't go exactly the way I expected. What did I learn from that? See, what was different about that? What would I do differently if I had a chance to do it over again? We start reflecting. We start reflecting on what we've just done. And we go around the circle. Now, some people start by doing. Some people, they just get a little bit of information and they start doing. So we used to use the example of if you took a group of people and just brought them into a room, and on the table there was a bunch of newspapers spread out on the table to cover the table, and one of these little plastic model kits, that we used to build when we were kids. Maybe it's a car, or maybe it's an airplane, something like that, a boat. And there's tubes of glue, and there's X-Acto knives, and there's paintbrushes, and all these things. And you sat these different people around the table. Somebody would pick up the box and open it. They would start doing. They would just jump right in, Other people would say, well, wait a second, I wonder why are they having us do this? Why are we here? They're trying to reflect on the whole thing. What is the purpose of this? And still others are going back to, well, the last time I did a model, we took all of the parts that needed to be painted black, and we painted them black first. Maybe we ought to do it. They're trying to connect. You see, they're trying to connect to the old way that they did it. Excuse me. So people have different preferences. They have different places to start. And I just mentioned that to you because maybe that's you. Maybe you want to jump in and start doing something. Maybe you want to start processing it by deciding, well, what could I do? What should I do? Maybe you want to think some more about it, Maybe you want to try to fit it into other things that you've learned a little bit more. But just be aware. Just be aware of this circle, that you want to go around this circle. So for the last 4 weeks, we've been summarizing the essence of the teaching, which, as I mentioned at the beginning, is Dr. Holmes restating Thomas Troward's The Creative Process in the Individual. There is this thing called life. You can call it God, you can call it nature, you can call it spirit, you can call it whatever you want, you can call it. But it is. It is there, it is. And it is creative. And its creation has to be by a movement within itself, a movement of thought. It must decide that which it would have. And once it makes that decision, another part of itself acting as what we would call the law brings it about. And then after it is brought about, after the creation is unfolding, the reflection takes place. The divine enjoys itself in its creation, enjoys itself anew. And just, if you can, try to think of it in joyful terms. Try to think of it in playful terms, you know. The divine creates out of joy. It creates to experience joy. It doesn't need anything. Right? That which has everything, which is everything, doesn't need anything. It doesn't create out of a sense of want or a sense of need or a sense of lack. You know, we do things because we have to, right? How many people would actually go to work if they didn't have to? Yeah. Universal basic income, everybody would be happy to stay home. But the divine doesn't work that way. It creates to experience something new and different in a new way, in a unique way. So the Hindu mystics might tell us we come from the delight. We are in the delight, but we don't quite realize that. And we go back to the delight. So I want you to think about this. Think of it in playful terms. Think of it in delightful terms, that the divine is constantly thinking, it is constantly choosing, it is constantly deciding, and it is constantly creating, because it cannot help not create. And it has created you and I as its instruments to do that here. So our role in life then is that we must decide. We must choose. We must become aware of what thinking is. We must become aware of what's going across our field of awareness. And we must choose. We must choose. And this is kind of a really big step in what gets us started on our path of spiritual growth, is when we decide to become aware of what we're aware of. When we decide that trained thinking is more powerful than untrained thinking, and we stop acting as a victim of our thoughts. And I use the word "our thoughts" just because we understand that. But I would really rather say we become aware of what's in the field, our field of awareness. So it's like there's a TV set playing in our head, and stuff comes and stuff goes and stuff comes and stuff goes. But as we are developing, we believe that stuff is our stuff. We believe those thoughts are our thoughts. We believe I am the one thinking those thoughts, and therefore I must act upon them. We become aware of the emotions, and we think those are my emotions. So a sad thought or a sad emotion comes up and we think I am sad. But as we start to grow, as we start to practice our meditation, as we start to become less entangled with our thoughts, excuse me, we become the observer of them. Ah, there's an angry thought. I am the one observing the angry thought. But I don't have to be angry. See, we start to take that dominion that Genesis tells us about. We start to take dominion or ownership or control over our thoughts. And that's kind of a prerequisite for any other growth that we're going to do. The one thing that we can do that, as far as we know, other species can't do is be self-aware, to be aware of our thoughts. And it's the one thing we spend the least time doing. We spend time reacting. We spend time responding. We spend time in debate. We spend time caught up in the events of the day. And anybody can do that. Everybody can do that. But the one thing that we can do, that we ought to be doing, is to be self-aware. Not self-conscious, self-aware. Right? So self-conscious is, I'm aware of myself, I'm embarrassed, typical kind of thing. You know, like I'm going into a very important meeting and I spill coffee on my shirt, and I've got this big, don't ask me how I know this, got this big brown stain on my shirt and on my tie. And here I am going to present in front of very senior people in an organization. I'm self-conscious, you know. I'm embarrassed by this. That's self-consciousness. Self-awareness just means we are aware. We are aware. So our first step in growth then is we have to develop this ability to be self-aware. And we must practice that. It's not, it's not like get up in the morning, jump in the car, go to work, get busy, come home, flip on the TV, do whatever we do. We must take time to practice that. And as we become self-aware, then we start to understand what we have been talking about, not only for these 4 weeks, but forever, which is we are part of a spiritual system, and that spiritual system operates on thought. And because we are part of that which creates by thought, our thoughts are creative. It is done to us according to our belief. As we think and believe in our hearts, so it is, right? So what we're doing there is connecting this idea that our thoughts are creative to other things that we have heard. All of the self-help psychology books that you've ever read, all of the secrets of success books, that you have ever read, even the books to tell you how to excel at sports by visualizing your performance. In golf they would tell us you got to see the shot, you got to see the ball going up on the green and rolling up to the hole, you got to feel the swing in your mind, and all of these different techniques that we are taught are all for the same purpose of helping you to develop the mindset, the attitude, and the belief that you can do it and that you are doing it. Well, why does that work? See, why would all of those different things work? And we would say they work because there's a power in the universe that responds to you according to your belief. Once you become self-aware, once you start to understand that there's everybody saying it, excuse me, everybody's talking about it, change your thinking, change your life, then you have to do it yourself. You have to do it yourself. You have to decide, well, if this were true, what would I change about my life? What would I change about my experience? What would I have different in my life? If I could, what would it be? And we start choosing things. And typically we tell people, choose something you think is doable, because if you start out with, well, I think I would grow wings and fly, it might take you a while to believe that. Think about something doable, something that you believe in. Do you believe you can have a better job? Do you believe you can earn more money? Do you believe you can be happier? Do you believe you can attract into your life, a fun partner, a friend, a significant other, What is it that you would have differently in your life? And then you set about using the practice of spiritual mind treatment, as we teach in the classes, to produce that change within yourself and to set into motion that power that responds to you according to your belief, to have it work with you and for you to continue to produce that change. That's what you're doing. That's what you're trying to do. So in the doing, what you are doing is you are causing your consciousness to expand. You are causing your consciousness to grow. As Dr. Holmes said, with all of your getting, you have to get God. You're not going to have and keep any demonstration without an expanded concept of God. Now, it is very important that we understand that that's what we're doing, because sometimes people get hung up and they think, just like religions can get hung up with doing stuff about religion, ritual and ceremony and buildings and things like that. We think, well, gee, there's power in the universe responds to me exactly according to my belief, and I can use that power to produce changes in my life, so I am going to use it to get lots more stuff. Bigger houses and cars and boats and all those kind of things. And you can. I mean, the law doesn't care. The law doesn't say, no, you can't have that. If you can believe it, you can do it. You can have it. As the Stoics said, what the mind can conceive and believe, the mind can achieve. And Dr. Holmes says we go through that phase. It's only natural that we go through that phase, that we want to have a better human life, a better physical life. Excuse me. But as Joel Goldsmith tells us, then, at some point we realize that what we were trying to do is we were trying to bring God down to our level to use God for a better human experience. And then we realize that is not the desired end result. The desired end result is for us to move into that spiritual experience. Now, as we do our treatment and as we do our daily spiritual practice, say for health or for wealth or for love, or self-expression, all of those things, what we are doing is like doing our daily exercise. Okay? You do your physical exercise every day, your body gets stronger. You do your spiritual exercise every day, and you are constantly expanding your awareness of God. How is it that we can have better health in our life? Well, we must recognize that God is health. And this perfect health that God is everywhere present, omnipresence. It has created us out of itself as its instrument of delight, to express its delight in this world, to take delight in our expression of its own life. And therefore it must wish only the best for us. It must wish for us only what it wishes for itself. So this being said, then the truth of our experience must be that the power and the wisdom and the capability of expressing perfectly healthy cells, organs, tissues, systems in these physical bodies, it's all here right now. And we accept that, and we release and we let go of everything and anything within us, within consciousness, that tells us anything different. Nothing can stand to the inevitableness of God. As Wendy said in the opening, nothing that has ever happened in the past can stop us from being in the present now. Nothing that we have ever believed in the past can prevent us from experiencing the presence and the activity of God here and now. As Dr. Holmes says, it makes no difference how long the room has been darkened. It doesn't matter who darkened it. As soon as you flip the light switch, there's light. So we start to recognize then, what is it that we're thinking? We become aware, self-aware of our thoughts. We become self-aware of the patterns of our thoughts. We become self-aware of the patterns of the things that we constantly bring into our lives. We start to recognize, hey, I'm a spiritual being. I am not just a physical human being going through life more or less as a victim of life. But life cooperates with me to the degree that I cooperate with it. And then we wish to cooperate. We wish to learn more how to cooperate. We wish to practice our cooperation so we get better at cooperating. And in that practice, in that discipline, in that putting ourselves into that situation on a regular basis of contemplating what God is and what our relationship to God is, and what that means in our life, what we are doing is we are growing. We are growing on a daily basis. And then what happens is our life becomes our practice. We may start out by taking 20 minutes in the morning and 20 minutes in the evening and considering some specific change we wish to bring about in our lives. But as we continue to grow, every moment of every day is an opportunity to practice. What am I feeling right now? What am I thinking right now? How am I reacting and responding right now? Is this the way I wish to be? Do I see and feel and experience the presence of God in this moment? And if not, what have I let come between me and it? I think the ultimate realization that we have is that what we are looking for is looking for us. What we are looking for has caused us to seek. As Dr. Holmes says, that which we are seeking has caused us to seek. We have been born into a world that tells us there's this gap, there's this separation, there's this body of water between us and a desired goal, which is the experience of God. And we must have some sort of a raft to get across it. Whether that be religious practice, whether that be studying, whether that be meditating, whether that be spiritual mind treatment, something we typically start out thinking we need something. But eventually we come to realize, again, what the Buddhist teaching tells us in the example of the raft, is that once we get to the other side, we realize that not only is it silly to carry our raft around and tell everybody how wonderful our raft is, but we realize that there was never a gap in the first place. That we are actually exactly where we were when we started, but we are not the same people. See, what has changed is there has been a shift in our consciousness. That is the gap. The gap exists in our consciousness. It is our belief in separation. Excuse me again. Remember, it is done unto us according to our belief. If we believe in separation, we have the experience in separation. So all of our practice is little by little by little chipping away at different areas of our consciousness where we have a belief in separation. And it's kind of like the sculptor taking that block of marble and slowly chipping away everything that doesn't look like the angel. So as we embark one more time on another year of our spiritual growth together, I hope that you take some time, or have taken time, or continue to take time to stop and say, well, wait a minute, if I live in a universe that responds to me according to my belief, and I have the ability to change my beliefs, then what do I want to do with that? And while I am doing that, can I recognize that what I'm doing is causing myself to grow more deeply in my understanding of God? And while I am doing that, can I invite myself every day in my spiritual practice, in my treatment, in my meditation, can I invite myself to open myself more fully to the experience of God? Augustine, in his work on his Confessions, he talked about love. See, now love is the experience of unity. It is the experience of oneness. It is the experience of the presence of God. Right? Love. Love is a beautiful spiritual practice. He said, love and do what you will. Love and do what you will. But he also said, I ask nothing of thee, not even thy love. I only want thee. I think what we really want is we only want the experience of the divine. That's what we want. We use process and we use techniques and we use practice to get us there. Let 2020 be a year of practice. Let 2020 be the year that you use the things that you know, that you've read, that you've been told and you've been taught. And you apply them for one purpose: a deeper experience of God. And so it is.